Wait, really?
Yeah, it's a place called Stabo Care. There's actually a military base not far from it, and his home was nearby. But Ben Gurion, toward the end of his life, he made this whole argument about how I think it was a way of partly sublimating all of his whatever stuff he had for all the disposition of 48 further north. But he was like, if Israel is a future, it's going to be in the south. And so there's this beautiful view. What you're looking at is where he died. Which is very funny because the reason that they show this picture is because Shapiro is saying something about how the desert sucks, and that was all Israel got.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm tweeting that together Noah Collard and I will look at another viral Ben Shapiro video covering the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
We're gonna break down the truth.
How viral Ben Shapiro video covering the conflict. He lies about the history. Okay, that's like fine, I think. All right, that's a good way to do it. Here, blast it. I'm gonna blast this real quick into my chat as well, so they know. But yeah, things have deteriorated dramatically, I would say, and they've gotten worse and worse and worse. There's also the Ben Shapiro Israel versus Hamas and why he would never support Biden over Trump.
Oh, that's really, I love what I liked about when prepping for this is that like the optimal way to absorb Ben Shapiro and his full Ben Shapiro-ness is to play the videos at 1.5 times speed.
The optimal way is to speed him up by 1.5. I feel like my brain would explode trying to hear what he has to say. Or you mean by slowing it down? Let me see if I can find the video real quick. Oh, here it is. Here's the truth about Israel versus Palestine.
It explicitly.
Please put it on at 1.5 speed. You can get a feel for what I'm talking about. He sounds awesome.
I will not be able to understand what he's even fucking saying. Hello, Noah, can you hear me? No one's back.
I think I can hear you. Can you hear me? My internet stinks right now. So I'm just going audio. I turned off my. Yeah, I just turned off my camera.
As long as you can watch, what's going on, I think you should be fine.
Yeah.
If only we had the fiber optic that Hezbollah apparently has. When I found out about this, did you know this? Did you know that Hezbollah has its own like personal fiber optic cable network?
I absolutely had no idea. So it's like impervious to bombing.
That and also like they have a completely shut off like communications network, I guess, that like Israel can't hack into or tap into through traditional means. And when I found this out, it made me so fucking mad that in Los Angeles, California, I do not have this. And now
they probably have 0 pen.
I want Nasrallah to fucking come here and take over. I am perfectly fine with a Shia takeover of this part of Los Angeles, at least. I legitimately, dude, the system is so broken. I guess we're not gonna have any subs, chat. I'm sorry. But anyway, let's do it. Let's go. Let's get it started.
Alrighty, so today we're going to talk about the history of the Israeli-Palestinian-Arab conflict. In order to discuss that history, we have to go back in time, like way, way back.
I like that he immediately starts off by saying Palestinian-Arab conflict because this is a funny little very racist thing that Zionists regularly engage in, which is to say that like Arabs are a monolith. And it's like one way to engage in the myth making and the necessity of a Jewish ethno state, because like all of the surrounding Arabs are one track minded, and that like it's a way to also associate like purges and things that have happened in other Arab countries with Palestinians, as though like the Palestinians played a role in that at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and also it's like trying to basically erase the fact that like there are such things among Arabs, like as opposed to just being like, oh yeah, they're all the same, totally interchangeable. I mean, just it's racist. It's racism. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, that's it. It's usually, it's anytime you want to understand, you know, an argument as to like, anytime you want to understand an argument, it's like either going to revolve around might is right, or it's going to revolve around just straight, pure, unadulterated Hitlerian racism towards Arab people. That's it.
In time. First, this particular video is sponsored by our friends over at ExpressVPN.
Oh, fuck yeah.
The Jewish homeland has always...
He's like, guess what? I'm going to do some ethnic cleansing denial here. A little... This light genocide denial is sponsored by ExpressVPN.
...been the dream in Israel. Okay, to understand how tiny this slot of land is, you kind of have to look at this map. Okay, so this tiny area right here covers Israel and actually some other countries. Okay, the entire map, if you were to zoom out...
Yeah, what about the Palestinian land then? It's even smaller than that. Fucking got him. Owned. See, I don't have a notepad, but I'm quick with it, Noah. You see that?
Yeah, no, I see it. I mean, it'd be looking different. By the way, my internet's better, so if you just don't hear me for a second, it's because I'm doing maintenance. I'm making improvements over here.
Okay, making improvements. Nice. All right.
Take a look at the Arab world, what you would see is this enormous swath of the globe, and then you would see like this tiny pinprick about half the size of New Jersey, and that constitutes modern-day Israel. It's a very
small bean
plot of land. And if you were to look at this area, like the narrowest part of the land is currently constituted, you'd be looking at about 9 miles.
Wait. Why is the Egyptian flag upside down? What's going on there? He just kind of slapped it on without even thinking about it. Okay, never mind. That's
the Jewish history with regard to the land of Israel begins approximately 1300 BCE, before the birth of Christ. Moses leaves Egypt somewhere around 1300 BCE. There are various sort of attempts to date this. A little bit later in the century, Joshua enters the land. He crosses the Jordan River, right? So the Jewish people go out here. They pass through the Red Sea. They end up wandering around in the desert, and then they enter the land of Canaan, right, which is this whole area. By about 1000 BCE, the kingdom of David is established. Right, Jerusalem is the capital, right? This is the first that Jerusalem matters sort of in world history. Remember?
Done.
So
sorry, I was gone for a second.
No, it's all good. So I still think like this is the I wanted to sort of just put a pin in at this moment with this part of this, where like I think with this subject you're really just kind of beginning from way behind if you have to begin your explanation for like why your side is right in like 2,000 years ago ancient history. Like if that's where like you're beginning it, like you're just like at that point, like the stuff that you're just treating as like historical fact, and you're giving the same weight as, you know, he'll go on to like events of the 20th century. Like that's crazy. Like just the idea that like there were like the same stable understandings, you know, and so like it's such a like I just want to point that out that like this is
a time when there's no nation states even. Like the concept of like a nation state was not going to be established for like 2,000 years. It's fucking insane.
When we get to time code 4 minutes and 20 something, believe you me, my notes have me going in on that.
Yeah.
But you best believe it is not pleasant.
And also, I mean, to be fair though, as a pan-Turinist myself, I do agree with this. I think like the pan-Turinist Mongolian Turkic Republic must seize control of everything all the way to Europe, in my opinion. So, you know, because technically we were there. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. This argument doesn't work in any capacity. It is immoral. It is silly. It's laughable. The fucking Palestinians, some of which are Christian, some of which are Jewish, some of which are Muslim, that you have slaughtered are also when you go back long enough in time, are literally the same people that Ben Shapiro is talking about that did not get purged from the area and just simply converted to Christianity, converted to Islam.
Well, when he gets to, I want to show you, I do want to, like, hit play, because in a second he starts talking about what the world was like at this time in like 1300 BCE, and I found a map that made me laugh about it. I'll send it.
We're still 1,000 years before Christ. By 957 BCE, the first Temple of Solomon is built. It is built in Jerusalem. Now remember, this is still a good 1,600 years before the rise of Islam. There's a lot of infighting among the Jews. There's a separation between the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel. Those are two.
Like the people that he's talking about are literally the Palestinian people that stayed behind. Like, shut the fuck up. Some of which.
So it's so funny.
It's so stupid. Also,
He
like,
it just makes no sense.
I love, dude, you know what though? I do love the fucking psychotic like defense of trying to create an ethno state. So like no matter what you do, the mythos has to be so, again, Hitlerian, where you have to do like
exactly.
There's no way to engage in this without like there's no way to engage in this like
I'm sorry, are you saying that there's a connection between the blood and the soil?
Yeah, exactly. It's like exactly. It's so psychotic to be like, well, you know, I'm doing blood and soil, but I'm actually Jewish, so it's fine to do the blood and soil argument. Is like
well, every other nation in the world gets to have blood and soil. Why not the Jews? Like every other nation gets to have a Hitler particle. Why can't the Jews? Like,
what are we gonna do? Are we gonna fucking look at like the teeth of the Palestinian children that have been slaughtered to like find that like they are also descendants of the same people? In comparison to like Ashkenazi Jews who probably aren't, by the way.
Keep going, because in about 10 seconds, Ben is about to really cook.
Separate kingdoms, and you end up with ancient maps that look sort of like this, right? This ancient map is the kingdom of Israel, which was 10 of the tribes, and then you have the kingdom of Judah, which is the one that was governed by the
to make a geopolitical point.
The first exile that happens to the Jews happens in 722.
Wait, what the fuck? Where did he get this guy? Wait. Is he PragerUing? This is a PragerU-ass thing to do, to be like, look at this map.
No. He's got the map on the whiteboard that he's not using any of the whiteboard features of, I should note. So he could have just had a static map. I don't know why he has that map there on the whiteboard, because he's not, whatever. He's not, and then the map that he's holding up is literally just like, it's like a map of biblical literature. It's about like where we believe the different tribes of Israel, the literal 12 sons of Jacob, and like their descendants went. Like he went to Sunday school on your ass.
Yeah, this motherfucker went source God. Okay. Yeah. Owned. Get fucking owned. Source the Bible. Thank you very much. Have you heard of it? He is such a He's such a little bitch for fucking Christian, evangelical Christians. Like, it's not even funny, dude. It's such a bitch. Anyway.
BCE, when the Assyrians rush in from the north, you can see the Assyrian Empire at the top of this map. They rush in from the north. Then there's another exile that takes place in 586 BCE. This is the Babylonian exile. So from way the hell out here on this map, the Babylonians come in, they conquer the land, and they destroy the first temple.
All right,
in 515 BCE.
If Ben was really on his Bible shit and not just a player hater and a kind of a poser, then he would know that like the kind of famous thing about the Babylonian exile is that the book of the prophet Jeremiah, which is really, he's the prophet who tells the story of what's going on among the Jewish people, in that time before they go into this exile. It's like all about how like they're doing child sacrifice and like there's moral degeneracy, and that like this exile is in many respects like a punishment for sins that they had committed against themselves, and this is God's way of punishing them. So I will say, Ben, demerits on your biblical scholarship here, because he's leaving out some key elements.
Thank you. I don't know anything about these religious justifications, because I usually just skip this part and go, yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, no. I mean, I did some fact checking on when he starts to just try and do like Roman history on the fly, which is pretty funny.
There's this great return from Babylonia, and the second temple is built in 63 BCE. The Romans.
God, I really wish that they went with Uganda. It would have been so funny. Like in moments like this, I'm like, oh man, it was so close. Could you imagine?
It definitely. I mean, just like a whole nation of people being asked to move from under the air conditioning. Yeah, I can.
No,
and like the hottest, hot, humid plane. I guess no. Yeah, Uganda's really huge. It's jungle, right?
Yeah, but I was thinking more along the lines of like Ben Shapiro trying to do like this backronym ass like religious justification for Uganda. He'd have to like make up like what kind of mythos would they have for Uganda, other than the fact that like the British people thought, the British government thought that this would be the best place to send the Jews.
I mean, it's actually kind of like it's a joke question, but it's actually like a really good point because like the Soviets did try and they actually did set up like a pretty insane failed experiment to create like a Jewish state in the Far East, like in the Stalin years, and it didn't really go anywhere for a number of different reasons. Most of all, it was in like like a shitty part of Siberia. Like already a pretty shitty part of the world to try and live. And but it was called like a
sending
Jewish
people to Siberia.
I mean, it was like a great and like imagine like a bunch of Jews come up, like a bunch of Yiddish scholars come up to you and they're like, "Excuse me, Mr. Stalin, what if you sent us out there and you could just have all your Jews out there, and you could think of it as like retraining these bourgeois." Merchant Jews into being, good, Soviet worker types. Right. But then, of course, what happens is like, everybody goes out there and they see like bugs that are the size of peaches and they're like, fuck this, I'm out. And it never takes off. But that was like their idea of like a Jewish autonomous region.
He sent the Tatars there too, right? I thought.
I don't know if he sent them to the same place. I read like one book about this a few years ago, but the like, I think the comparison is just that, like, in Uganda, like you would have basically like at least there, I mean, it would have been a different kind of settler colonial project, but like you wouldn't have had like the potency of this, of this myth animating, like why Gazans can't be allowed to have electricity.
A myth that the fucking secular founders did not also believe in personally, but thought dummies would get on board with. Like, I feel like there was no, like, the reason why Palestine was chosen is because it was more so like, there's some, like, kind of religious myth-making that we can engage with here with respect to Palestine that we can't with, like, Uganda or anywhere else, on top of the other ironic argument that the British thought that the native population in Uganda would be violent, like, would be way more violently resistant to populating the area with Jewish settlers at the time, which, of course, obviously happened with Palestinians as well. But
yeah,
but it was like the religious justification is not like the major reason here, right? I always felt like it was more so not one that was held on to by the.
Shapiro actually touches on like when he gets to the like 19th century period, and he talks about Herzl, like it was a like a frame, like he frames it as a like what was because of these secular political concerns, which is like is true. But the thing that ultimately, that like I think that like, we are now seeing and we've sort of been seeing for some decades, the bill coming due on like, a bunch of secular guys trying to take what is fundamentally a religious national myth and hide that character of it. When, as Israel gets on in the years as a state, it sort of emerged that like the only people with like a cohesive, organized plan to maintain and expand the political structure as it exists are these, religious wackos, so I do think like that to me is kind of one of these, it's like, well, I guess that kind of does show that, perhaps there was a really just fundamentally religious bent to this shit all along that just could not be denied. And
I think that the fundamentally religious bent, in my opinion, contributed to the unimaginable success of the Zionist project, in my opinion. Like, I would not sit here and say that this was not a successful project. If you look at the original goals, right? I mean, they established a lot of the original goals of the project in general. It was incredibly violent. It was incredibly brutal. But I feel like the myth-making has stuck.
This video is a good example of the myth-making because he really does, like, he tells one side of the story, not just in the presentation of it, but, like, literally he does not talk about what Palestinians experienced, period. Like this is honestly like a 40-minute book report. And he also kind of like loses the chronology meaningfully about halfway through. And then he just starts explaining what Iron Dome does and stuff.
Sick.
So it's also a classic Ben Shapiro joint in that like, and a Daily Wire joint, and that like they clearly gave up on trying how to make a thing like halfway through it. And assumed correctly that YouTube viewers who are their audience just wouldn't notice.
Yeah.
Romans take over. So Pompey, at that point, not the emperor, but just a general,
Oh my
takes
God.
over the area, and Judea becomes a vassal state. And Judea remains a vassal state of the Roman Empire, basically through the end of an independent Jewish kingdom. It's called Judea at this point. It is not called Israel. 70 CE is the destruction
None of
of
this
Jerusalem.
matters.
There's a Jewish
Everybody can
revolt.
just like quit. They could, you know, be eating popcorn right now and chewing loudly. There's none of this matters.
Yeah.
Although
no,
the next part he tells a kind of funny lie.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Against the Roman government because of bad administrative practices and because of infighting and because of a crackdown on religious practice, and Jerusalem is destroyed. And not only is Jerusalem destroyed, the Second Temple is destroyed at the time as well. 130 to 136 CE, there is a massive revolt by the Jews under a general named Simon Bar Kokhba. The Bar Kokhba revolt was extremely damaging to the Roman Empire. They had to expend extraordinary resources in order to stop the Bar Kokhba revolt, which is
not true. There is like not evidence that Bar Kokhba was like, that is just like straight, you know, that is just like nationalist myth making. And in fact, the Bar Kokhba myth was only really resuscitated, as I'm sure you could imagine, like, you know, in service of the creation of the state of Israel. There's a number of myths that are, you know, like that sort of speak to this. I mean, the Masada myth being the biggest one, this idea that like there were a bunch of Jews who would rather commit suicide than live under Roman rule on this mountaintop near the Dead Sea. You know, this is the building blocks of,
but it's important.
It.
This is important to understand because it also shows you like the post-Holocaust understanding, or even the treatment or mistreatment of Holocaust survivors, and like I think that the culture or the attitude that Israelis had towards like how militant they are. It's like very jingoistic for that reason, I feel like, where it's like, yeah, yes. We like you guys actually did not fight back, which is false, of course, but like you didn't fight back hard enough, and we are going to make sure that never happens again.
Exactly. It's, you know, you have to like, it's not enough to have acknowledged that like there was this like grievous wound dealt to the Jewish people. It's the idea that like, well, the like, you know, our overcorrection will be the only thing that protects Jews ever again, when in fact all we're doing is, you know, making it so that we both revisit the same crime on other people and make Jews elsewhere in the world very unsafe.
Yeah, but making Jews elsewhere in the world unsafe quite literally fits the goals of the Zionist project. So that's it gets interesting. I mean, that's, yes, exactly. Which is also something Herzl wrote about. Like Herzl believed in anti-Semitism as sort of a natural course of history because Israel did not exist, because the Jews were this, you know, nation that did not have their land. Because Herzl, you know, like he was like he is a guy coming up with like a very, very 19th century solution to the problem of, you know, what to do with like the pogroms in the East, you know, with the in the Pale of Settlement that are emerging, and that is the genesis of the first wave of immigration to Israel. You know, before there's really even an organized Zionist movement on the level, like, you know, of the Herzl stature. There's a famous event in the 1880s called the Basel Congress that kind of is considered the kind of inciting event for like the Zionist movement. And there's this really, really, really deeply felt idea that like, yeah, anti-Semitism is like, if it's a natural force in the world, then our corrective to it has to become a nation, you know, among the others. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple logic to the point that it's, you know, fairly disturbing that it became the constituent of, you know, the world we live in. Yeah.
Which is why it was almost an independent kingdom for a solid 4 or 5 years there. They renamed the area Palestine as an insult to the Jews. That's why it was named.
Pause this. That's fake. That's fake. Not real. Sources right here sending to you. Boom. Ben Shapiro. You are a liar. You are the clown of the week. You are a fucking punk. Fuck
How many
you.
Pinocchios? How many Pinocchios?
We are going with 5 Pinocchios.
That's really fucked up because you just used an anti-Semitic cartoon. First of all, what's Pinocchio known for? Having a big nose. That's number one. Number two, you said a Jewish man is lying. It's fucked up. You did that.
Not
I
cool,
disavow.
man.
I disavow. I disavow. I disavow.
So
yeah. Ooh, from Forward. This says the real history of the name Palestine. You know what's really funny? I had what's his face? God damn it, Zach Foster on, who literally did scholarly research on precisely this, where we talked about it, and then there's actual historical evidence to where like the name Palestine comes from, and has been considered throughout history to be Palestine in that region. And no evidence that this was like no evidence that like there was a fucking way to like stick it to the Jews there or some shit and call it Palestine.
No, there's no evidence for that. And like what this guy's letter to the editor shows, and I liked it because he's just a high school classics teacher, is just that it's like, yeah, there's like other evidence that shows that the term was used in different, like there's other uses of the term in context from the preceding period that suggests that like, yeah, this idea that it was some sort of like, punishment or insult is not really hold water. But it's like part of like the motivated reasoning, at least in my experience, like that sort of makes up a lot of this like kind of, like this like Zion, like the, what is ultimately like, the kind of like constituent or the core rather, chronology of Zionism. It involves just like a whole bunch of really disastrous wounds from 2,000 years ago that have to be rectified.
Yeah, I mean, here, I'll read the important part of this. Yes, Palestine as an administrative provincial category was afforded as a designation after the Bar Kokhba rebellion. However, more than a century before Bar Kokhba, am I saying that right? Kokhba? No, I don't know how to say it. Okay, I'm not going to fuck it up. But before the Romans had any political use for the term, the Roman poet Ovid wrote that a primordial mythological character sat by the edge of the waters of Palestine, contextually referring to a region west of Mesopotamia. In the 5th century BCE, the Greek historian Herodotus referred by name to Palestine as a land connecting Egypt and what is now known as Lebanon, inhabited by several peoples. So it is wrong about the Palestinian designation being one that was given to that area specifically to like fuck over the Jewish population because they like fought against the Philistine. All right, let's continue.
People say historic Palestine. Understand that the existence of Palestine was meant as a name, as an insult to the Jews, who were considered the historic inhabitants of the land, and it is first used in 136 CE.
It's just like ridiculous because, like, listen, Jewish history is a target-rich environment for like genuine grievances that are completely understandable and should be covered. So why make up one from 3,000 fucking years ago that is entirely irrelevant? Like, anyway, sorry.
Well, now that he also realizes he has to cover the 1,500 years, like, until it gets like, relevant to him again, it is like, it's pretty funny how much he phones it in here. He's just like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Yeah, it's the man knows how to keep us all entertained.
One thing that I always find really interesting about, like, especially Zionists like Ben Shapiro, who are like more evangelical Christian Zionists than they are like Jewish when they defend this perspective, is that they have this weird proclivity or weird tendency to like kind of lighten the burden of European anti-Semitism and Christian anti-Semitism specifically, which in my opinion is like the most, at least looking at the history of Jewish populations around the planet, is the most important anti-Semitism, like the pogroms and the ethnic cleansing and also the Holocaust.
Well, it only ever can be used as like a crutch, because if you actually explain it, then like it produces like things get inconvenient really quickly. Like if you are talking about like, I mean, in part because I think that like, people like Ben Shapiro, like they really stake a lot in this idea of there being some, Western Judeo-Christian bullshit, like tradition that is worthy of defense, that is some coherent, stable concept that we need to preserve and blah, 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 blah. And I think that when you look at those sorts of European crimes and so forth, like you end up at kind of, realizing that like, Zionism is just another one of them. There's no, like, you can't, I don't think that like you can only describe how the Holocaust, you can only describe these things as like part of a permanent subjugation of Jews that applies everywhere to all Jews in any context, rather than as like, historically specific, discrete events that you can look at and learn from.
I'm just saying, even if you were to like reduce them to like a singular hatred for Jewish people in times of like material volatility and inequality, then the Christians still, I think, come out on top of like who's significantly more anti-Semitic. I always feel as though like there's this new because of the allegiance that Israel has with their European counterparts. I always feel as though there's this like desperate attempt to hyper focus on, like Germany does, the current anti-Semitism of the Arab world, right? Like over and over again, as though like, come on guys, forget about our thing. The thing that you need to focus on right now is look at how anti-Semitic the Islamic world is, right? I mean, come on.
Well, and it's exactly. Well, and that's the other thing, is that it's like, the by redirecting, and I would say that like a lot, because one of the great crimes and issues that the West faces, if there is such a thing as the West, but really we're talking about like NATO and the EU, is that there's been this 20 years of some really like just upheaval in the Arab world and in the Middle East outside of the Gulf monarchies. Civil war, mass migrations, refugee crises, multiple revolutions, most of which have gone very badly for the people, and for the and for expanding democracy and so forth. I think that there is like a just a kind of it's to me the how to best put it. I guess the way that I would say it is that like Israel wants to make it very clear that it's on the side of the white man here. And so whatever it takes to make the other seem as othery as possible, if it's talking about their Islamophobia, if it's talking about their just like all like their savagery, their beastliness, all of those like really nasty buzzwords that we've been seeing so much of this last few weeks. Like they're going to do that better than anybody ever else did. Gosh darn it. Which is why, I mean, like you see these people giving like fucking slave plantation owners a run for their money in terms of the colorful shit they come up with to say.
Oh yeah. And I think that the other purpose that it serves is also on the side, like the other purpose is to show like Europe, the hordes are coming your way, like the barbarian hordes are coming your way, and we are like the first line of defense, basically. I think that it plays that role as well, just like with Ukraine versus Russia. Like this was an argument presented over and over again that like Ukraine is the first line of defense against Russian incursions back into Europe. And I think like the perspective is to not only like hide the shame of European anti-Semitism and Christian anti-Semitism that have been very devastating throughout history, but also it serves the purpose of saying like universalizing the enemy, an enemy that is, of course, endlessly dehumanized through Orientalism and then also through America's war on terror. And now this enemy is at your doorstep and we will stop them. Like we're bravely stopping them. So you need us. You need us to exist in the way that we do.
Yeah. Yes. And, like we're also, mostly, Israel was like started by and like was led for the bulk of its existence by and actually still continues to be a European descended elite. But like all of the people that basically had to leave their, Arab or Persian country of origin, because of the creation of the state of Israel and the subsequent political upheaval. That is like that's actually proof that we are, more authentic. Like it's there's a way in which it always ends up coming to be to have like both ways, or that like Zionists try to have it both ways when you talk about the racialized dimensions of this, because you say that like, well, like Israel clearly wants to, like they want to be on the team of the white man here, but there is also like the fact that you can't erase that like majority of people that live in Israel who are Jewish Israelis are not descended from somebody who came from Europe. Or they are descended rather from somebody who came from outside of Europe, from likely Morocco, Yemen, Iran, etc. Yeah. And it does seem that, like, to me, the untenability of that without these it's not a distinction that you can I guess keep going unless you have an Arab class of people to constantly kick around. So there is a degree to which this is also there's just like an enormous amount of social and class division within Israeli society that goes unanalyzed and relatively under-discussed in a meaningful way, because it is contingent on this, continued ongoing dispossession and oppression of Palestinians or whatever.
Yeah, the permanent outgroup. The permanent outgroup is a necessity for any kind of fascist organization, because if you don't have the Arab population that you constantly are under threat of, an enemy that is both weak and strong that you have to always fight against, then you're inevitably going to move to different subgroups. And I think that obviously the immediate enemy, once let's say the ethnic cleansing campaign is successful and Israel ends up purging violently 5 million Palestinians from this entire land that is historically theirs, then you move on to the Arab population, which is a designation that you and I know is like a ridiculous one, because it's supposed to be Palestinian citizens of Israel, because like there are Arab Jews, but those are actually technically considered Jews in the population. So I think that they would move on to turn the crosshairs to the Palestinian citizens of Israel, and then inevitably working their way from like Ethiopian Jews and maybe even like black Jews, albeit marginal, all the way down to the entirety of the Arab Jewish population. If they were successful, it would consistently snowball into a smaller and smaller shrinking in-group, because that's just how fascism operates.
And in this case, they've also got like a it's part of what makes the if the Jews are consider themselves unique protagonists, then they have the Zionist movement has made for itself a unique enemy, in that there is even though like Arabs or Arab people in Arab countries and places are not interchangeable, there is a shared identity and a shared affiliation. And so that means that Israel has an other that it doesn't just dispossess and oppress, on its in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. It also has these people surrounding them completely: Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, etc. And we'll talk a bit more about this as the video advances, because then those nations, as nations, become relevant. Yeah. But that's another part of the story that was actually through Nasserism the real life question for Israel, which was, how the hell does this country get along with its neighbors?
Yeah. All right.
A solid 1,200 years after the Jews first enter the land at a minimum. Now, finally, we get to the founding of Islam. So Islam finally is founded around the 7th century CE.
He hates that.
Arabs take over this land in about 630.
He's like, he hates that. You can tell. Finally, Islam comes into
play.
He
hates that. He's like, it's not canon. It came after everything else happened. It's not cool.
Yeah. 36 CE. In 1099, the Crusaders decide that they are going to take back the land. And from 1099 to 1291, the Crusaders are fighting battles with the Islamic world and establish rule inside Jerusalem and inside Israel. In 1291, the Crusaders are defeated, and a Muslim group called the Mamluks take over. They rule for a couple of hundred years.
Rise up.
In 1517, the Ottoman Empire, another Muslim empire, takes over the entire area. Now, understand, since the destruction of...
Rise up, baby. Rise up.
Oh, yeah. Now, here's where he says the annoying thing about how, like, there was never a state of Palestine in any of this time. And it's like, yeah, the thing that didn't exist as a concept then. States.
I mean, I don't know if he'll mention this, probably not, but like I wonder if he'll talk about like Jewish migration and evacuation into the Ottoman Empire, and historically through like Arab areas as well, as they escaped pogroms and the like. I mean, this is like right wing, ultra Zionist. What's the Jerusalem Post? Is that the far right one?
I mean, it was always right wing. Now it's cuckoo.
There was one, like, it was like a British paper, I think. But anyway, like even authors there recognize that like the Ottoman Empire was considered to be infinitely more tolerant to Jewish people in comparison to their European counterparts.
You'll see he has a different false gripe to bring up.
But he won't say it because it's like it's a Muslim empire. But like I think that's important to recognize always, because like it goes heavily against the narrative of like Muslims and the Islamic world hated the Jews. Like it's just ahistorical.
The Kingdom of Judea. There has not been a single independent state called Palestine set up anytime in here. It has always just been a territory of an outlying empire, and pretty sparsely populated, actually, because there wasn't a lot there, as it turns out. The Ottoman Empire, this entire time from 1517 to 1918, till the end of World War I, during that time, they really didn't want you settling in the land, and so they had barred Jewish land purchase. You actually could not buy land.
Lie.
People, foreigners, others didn't. Like, this is, like, I went to double check this because I thought it was pretty brazen. But, like, you know, there may have been, like, specific or certain incidences, but, like, Jews were buying land in the Ottoman period. They changed the rules in the 19th century at some point because, I don't know, I guess it was probably, I mean, it was the declining years of the...
Even before.
It was that, well, really? I mean, either, so then, but it's just, yeah, it's like he's
100%. I will.
He's just making it up.
I hope I'm not, look, I mean, I'm not doing like Ottoman, I'm not doing like Ottoman defense here, maybe a little bit, but like legitimately, as far as I understand it, under the Ottoman Empire, Jewish people had rights that were not officially recognized as equivalent to everyone until, like you said, I think the 18th century. However, before then, Jews were under the same exact umbrella of like non-Muslims. They had to pay an additional tax, but they didn't serve in the military, but they had the capacity to get to the highest administrative duties in the land. They could own land as well. They did not, like, there was, they were not like relegated to mercantilism, but you know, if they wanted to, they could do that as well. So as far as I understand it, beyond like internal commotion, specifically with Greek Orthodox communities who felt like there was like a pecking order that Jews were carving a space outside of for themselves. Beyond that, it was, and of course there was still. I'm not saying that there was no like ethnic plight or anything like that. There was no ethnic tensions. Of course there were, but in comparison to their European counterparts, the Ottoman Empire was a place where Jewish people, on their own volition, by their own admission, was a place that they could own land and have and be able to prosper. It says, someone said, highest Ottoman Jew to serve, Hakim Yaqub Pasha, Mehmet II's Minister of Finance. But this is consistent. This is consistent with all non-Muslim populations.
Yeah, exactly. That was the thing that just felt like so disingenuous and like very obvious, which is that it's like he's trying to make this about like Jews getting specifically picked on and prevented from coming back here, when the reality is that like the period that he is talking about, like this, you know, let's call it like a 1500, 1700 year stretch of time. The only Jews who made really big hay out of trying to do a movement to go back to Israel were false messiahs. The most famous of which was a guy named Shabtai Tzvi, who his failed messiah tenure came in, I think 1666 is the year that he's traditionally credited with. And so it's also like Zionism, like what changes? Well, it wasn't that like the Ottomans just, like they suddenly said, actually, we're these Jews, we're going to let them do it now. It was because the it was because nationalism, like Zionism, was a concept, like the whole thing for the first time in 2,000 years, like had any sort of, it had legs. And as history proceeded, especially over the course of the 20s and 30s, it became even more useful, first as a colonial instrument, and then secondly, afterward, for solving, much of the Jewish problem of Europe, or what was remaining of the Jewish problem in Europe for them, by taking in Jews from there, and then later from the Arab world.
So the thing I was going to say is, and Chatter brought this up as well, something I talk about all the time. If Jews were not able to purchase land in the Ottoman Empire, then why the fuck did Theodor Herzl first go to the Ottoman Empire to purchase Israel in its entirety, with hopes that they could start the Zionist project before collaborating with the British eventually? Like the idea that like Jewish people were not treated well is, I think, diminished at that moment when you realize that like anything that predates the post-colonial movements, like movements towards nationalist emancipation in the Arab world, Jewish people were able to exist alongside Christians, and I think that is another point to basically prove that as well. Of course, the Ottoman Empire said no, obviously, but it still was, favorable enough that they could ask.
In this area, if you were Jewish, Jews started to make sort of backdoor deals with local Arabs to buy their land, and so you start seeing Jews trying to escape various places from which they've been exiled for thousands of years, back to the Holy Land. There's a constant Jewish presence here. Throughout all of these exiles, there's never no presence of Jews in, for example, Hebron or in Jerusalem.
I like that, again, he's just simply stating, like, there's Jews here, discounting the notion that, like, the people that he would have considered Jews in the 2,000-year process probably fucking converted. So, like, even from a blood and soil perspective, not that it fucking matters, because I think it's so stupid to, like, in the 21st fucking century, make a blood and soil argument. But he's unironically, like, if we busted out the fucking CalPERS and, like, started looking at people's haplogroups, you would come to that conclusion very quickly that those very same people that you're slaughtering as, like, Palestinian Muslims are literally your ancestors that you're claiming had the legitimate claim to that land, right? Sorry. Anyway. It's not just the Palestinian Jews that, kept up the Israeli Zionist project historically.
Well, I mean, the Zionism is also, there's like a rich subfield within it of people trying to develop explanations for how the Jews are different from the Palestinians, even though supposedly they both lived in this land together for 2,000 years. You know what I mean? Like, there's like an enormous amount of energy that goes into trying to say how different we are from them, in spite of the fact that, like, people are just fucking people, man.
Yeah. It almost feels like there's no way to develop an ethno-state and maintain an apartheid regime without being incredibly racist, like insanely bigoted. Fucking insane.
Or in various areas of the Holy Land. But the first major aliyah, which is termed the aliyah in Hebrew, that means to go up, right? Because there's a spiritual rising that takes place when you go to the Holy Land. The first aliyah is around 1882, it's late 19th century, and it's mostly Russians attempting to escape pogroms that are happening in Russia. By 1897, the Zionist movement begins, and this is the idea that there's going to be an independent Jewish state in Israel. It is launched by Theodor Herzl. He's the founder of the World Zionist Organization. He is not a particularly religious Jew. He launches this after the Dreyfus Affair. The Dreyfus Affair was this famous affair in France in which there was a member of the French...
He went to Harvard Law, and he says Dreyfus. It's Dreyfus. Dreyfus. Okay, continue, sorry.
Army, who was Jewish. He was falsely accused of spying for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It unleashed this giant wave of anti-Semitism. He was basically condemned despite evidence because of the anti-Semitism, and Herzl decided, well, anti-Semitism is too strong a threat. The Jews need some homeland to call their own. In 1917, Britain declares the Balfour Declaration. This says there will be a Jewish homeland.
Good guy. Good guy, Balfour, famously.
Not at all a gigantic anti-Semite.
Yeah. Like, such a good guy. Definitely don't look into his opinion on Jewish people in general or why this happened to begin with. Like, every step of the way, these guys were like, oh, dude, it's so sick. Let's put the Jews in the desert. What a sick idea.
And listen, what if we just have a bunch of fucking Arabs around them and we'll just get them really mad at each other so that they can't challenge our authority?
Yeah. Great. So sick.
The area of Israel, the amount of land that was promised to the Jews was actually not just what is labeled Israel, but also Jordan.
He's doing Transjordan. Oh, it's my favorite. This is like, I do legitimately believe, maybe I'm being ridiculous, but I do legitimately believe that, like, if this project comes to a hold, like, if this project comes to a conclusion, like, Jordan is next. Looking at, like,
well, I mean, because Jordan only exists because, like, it's an aid state. Like, it has no native industry, no anything. Like, it exists to have, like, an army, you know?
Yeah. It's common.
Which at this time was called Transjordan, which makes some sense in the sense that the Arab states around it were going to be Egypt, it was going to be Saudi Arabia, it was going to be Syria.
I love this. I'm sorry, I gotta mention this. This is my favorite. There's two different points where I love like the Zionist propaganda, like historical propaganda, where this point is one of them, and the second one is the giving back Sinai to Egypt, where like look, I'm giving the land back. It's like, this was supposed to be mine. Transjordan was supposed to be mine too, and it's like, what are you saying? Like, what? Like, I don't know if this is like important to even mention, unless you're talking about what you just brought up, the historical reference. I feel like he's just saying that to be like, this was what was given to us, but then, you know, we didn't even take it because we're magnanimous and nice and not like looking for as much land as possible as you suggest, right?
Yeah. He also, wait, sorry, I lost you for the last second there.
Tune me out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. It's fine. Let's just move on. We have fucking, this is a 40-minute video, and we've only gone through 6 minutes. We've only got through 6 minutes. We're continuing.
There are a bevy of Arab states that surround this entire region. In 1920, there are Arab pogroms against Jews in Jerusalem. So when people say,
all right, pause it here. Actually, I made a note on this.
Oh my God. Okay. Let's
so
hear
this
it.
is, well, so he's basically talking about a specific set of riots that took place in Jerusalem. And like, I don't think we need to say more than this. Just like, I invite somebody to go look at the fucking Wikipedia and tell me that just straightforward that this was a pogrom against the Jews. Like it seems really clear, if anything, it was like a lot of British mishandling, and that the historical record actually exonerates a lot of Palestinian leaders who for many years have been criticized as, you know, bloodthirstily cheering on Arabs to go after Jews, etc. But it's, yeah, it's just, he's saying something, and it's simply, I think, because he decided they need to put a little dot on the chronology to say another thing, because this was not, you know, he's picking one event out of many that are going on during this period that are like this.
He's making it seem like, well, he has to tie back like the Jewish people feeling unsafe in other Arab nations back to the Palestinians somehow. So I think that's why he's saying this part and not looking at it as though the native population there recognized that their supposed allies that were going to offer them Palestine was more interested in actually putting an entirely different non-native population in that area and engaging in this settler colonial project, which is what Zionism is. And and obviously that was the there was going to be a reaction to that is not, you know, that's not going to be positive. And because they're not seeing this as like a peaceful immigration. From their perspective,
no, it's for them it's very hostile.
Yeah, from their perspective, understandably, it's the British that were supposed to offer Palestinians this land in collaboration for their collaboration against the Ottoman Empire, and instead of giving them this land, now all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, we're just gonna keep we're just gonna keep bringing in people in here and forcibly displace you inevitably, and to say that that is simply just like anti-Semitic, and it was like anti-Semitic sentiment that caused them to feel angry at this, and not necessarily not necessarily a byproduct of like colonial occupation and false promises that the British gave to the Palestinian population there, is ridiculous. Here, the 1920 Nebi Musa riots took place in the British-controlled part of occupied enemy territory administration, and in the around the old city of Jerusalem, 5 Jews and 4 Arabs were killed and several hundred were injured. The riots coincided with and are named after the Nebi Musa festival, which was held every year on Easter Sunday, following the rising tensions in Arab-Jewish relations. The events came shortly after the Battle of Tel Hai and the increasing pressure on Arab nationalists in Syria in the course of the Franco-Syrian War. Anyway, all right, let's continue.
Conflict between Arabs and Jews until the creation of the State of Israel. That's just a lie. It's not true at all. There were major Arab pogroms against Jews in Jerusalem because Jews wanted to commit the great sin of praying at the Western Wall. This, of course, was not allowed. In 1922, this is post-World War I now, the British are given a mandate over the area of Palestine. They start walking back the promises of the Balfour Declaration. And the Brits separate off Transjordan, and they call it Jordan, and they say that's going to go to the Arabs. In 1929, there's another major riot, another major anti-Jewish riot in Hebron, or Hebron. The British, in response to all of this violence and all of this rioting, they decide they're going to just continually attempt to appease the Arab population.
Ben Shapiro he should like Google what people should like. Hebron today is like basically like it's a prison for Palestinians. There's a ghetto that they're tightly policed in. There are Palestinians who are trapped in their homes, literally not allowed to leave and go outside, and haven't been for many, many years. And there's a group of hardcore, some of the most fanatic settlers in the entire country who are protected, effectively given army protection in the middle of the city, and have complete freedom of movement. So it's like and they have shrines to all of these crimes visited upon the Jews there. Like this is these atrocities from this period are like a major part of the DNA of the Israeli right wing.
Yeah. He is he's again tying the civilian population fighting back against a colonial they're colonial occupiers, going back on their historic promises to be like, oh, they're just anti-Semitic, and not necessarily responding to the situation unfolding in front of them. That they just like at this point are simply, they're just like, oh, we hate Jewish people.
In British Mandate Palestine. So they begin restricting land transfers to Jews. In 1937, the Peel Commission
it got to a point where wait, is he going to talk about the terrorism or no?
Oh, he goes in.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, so it got to a point where even the British had to respond in this way, and there was still immigration happening, if I'm not mistaken, just illegally, right?
Correct.
Like, they were doing it without the go-ahead of the British at this point.
And like there was, there's like a rich tradition of like there were these rules about like how the British couldn't destroy a Jewish settlement if it wasn't, if it had these things, because that would mean it was an established settlement, but the Jews couldn't make new settlements. So you would, the stories go of like Jews running in the middle of the night trying to like set up, communities to just to basically, create new homes, because the whole issue was that there was an enormous, the economic privation. Remember, this is a global depression that was taking place in the 30s. There was an enormous amount of anxiety, particularly among the Arabs, about whether or not they would be able to continue feeding themselves, which is why, a lot of the early the early Jewish settlements were so agriculturally minded. They didn't just go in and immediately put up cities.
Yeah. Despite the fact that, as far as I understand, the areas that they were able to purchase through more peaceful means were not necessarily arable lands that were suited for any kind of like agricultural production, which becomes a major point of contention right around this point in history that Ben is going to get to, which he's not going to fucking mention because he's a piece of shit. But as far as I understand it, that was also the reason why the 1947 boundaries were seen as like unacceptable, given the population density, or sorry, given the demographics of the land at the time.
Suggests a partition plan with control by the British retained of Tel Aviv and Jaffa and Jerusalem. And there would be like a small sliver of land Israel would get.
The Peel Commission partition plan, Jewish state, Arab state under British rule.
But it would be pretty divided. It'd be like this little land here, maybe a little bit up here, and then most of the Negev, which is basically just an empty desert.
Oh, by the way, pause that. Yeah. That is the view from David Ben-Gurion's grave.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It's a place called Stabo Care. There's actually a military base not far from it, and his home was nearby. But Ben-Gurion, toward the end of his life, he made this whole argument about how I think it was a way of partly sublimating all of his whatever stuff he had for all the disposition of 48 further north. But he was like, if Israel is a future, it's going to be in the south. And so there's this beautiful view. What you're looking at is where he died, which is very funny because the reason that they show this picture is because Shapiro is saying something about how the desert sucks, and that was all Israel got.
Yeah.
At this point, Jews have been moving to Palestine in increasing numbers because anti-Semitism in Europe is getting worse, but also because there's this nascent labor and Zionist movement, and they're really making the agricultural areas flourish again. Economic growth in this region at this time is because Jews were moving in and they were bringing their resources with them, they were bringing their know-how with them, and they were working the land. And this was...
Wait, I thought that... Is this correct? I thought that like a lot of the Jews early on relied heavily on the agricultural techniques that they learned from the Arabs, but maybe I'm learning it from like maybe I know this from a way more biased perspective. But he's making it seem like the guys that were coming in were like all farmers and shit, and not necessarily.
They were like exactly, and like they also had like they wanted. I mean, this was like a huge problem for Israel because like the aspiration was to have a system of Jewish labor and not Arab labor. But the reality was that was very, that they weren't positioned to do that. They had a lot of, people who looked like David Ben-Gurion coming who weren't necessarily equipped to do all that kind of intensive farm work, to say the least. And, Israel is not like an agricultural breadbasket. So this was also difficult work to deliver yields that were not, especially impressive. Like in general, like what he's describing is like very, I'm sure it was like cribbed from Startup Nation or whatever.
Driving more Arab immigration to the land also because economic activity always drives population movement. In 1939, under Arab pressure, the Brits restricted Jewish immigration to 75,000 Jews per year. The Jews are saying, listen, we have like millions of people who want to move here. And the Brits...
Yeah, also, make no mistake, this is another part of the process where I get really frustrated, maybe because of my own personal biases being Turkish, but it's like, yeah, but you're making it seem like the fucking Arabs are at fault for the Holocaust. Bro, there's no, like, why aren't you more mad at America? This is what I don't understand. Like, why wouldn't you be so endlessly frustrated with other European nations that, like, did not, under any circumstance whatsoever, want Jewish people to come to their fucking countries? And they were like, yeah, fucking put them in the goddamn desert.
I mean, this is, this is where it's like why the blood and soil people and the like blood and soil Jews and anti-Semites love each other, because they fulfill each other's needs.
Like, think about it. Like, these are European Jewish people, right? They're escaping another, what they foresee as like another possible pogrom from another European country. There's plenty of Jewish people living in America. America says, fuck off. You can't come here. Sends them back. Why? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me that in the myth-making process here, like, am I sympathetic to people who were escaping what they foresaw as like the Holocaust? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm glad that they had somewhere to go. I think Rashida Tlaib actually has talked about this before, like, that was misquoted, where she says, like, I'm glad that my ancestors were able to like offer land to those who escaped the Holocaust. Like no matter how bad this cost was for my people, she said something like, it gives me great comfort when thinking about that. And then they like clipped her out of context to be like, Rashida Tlaib said the Holocaust gives her great comfort. Anyway, disgusting. But the point is, I don't know why. I don't understand why you would look at the situation and be like, and try to desperately almost always turn the argument into like anti-Arab bullshit. Does that make sense?
I mean,
like even the Holocaust is somehow the fucking Arabs' fault. Like, which is
that's like, I mean, there's a very good essay in N+1 that that just came out that I think is definitely like I gotta find, was it? No.
It's in functionally, it's no different. While you're looking for that, I'll just say this: functionally, it's no different than Benjamin Netanyahu lying and or engaging in the most egregious act of Holocaust revisionism by saying that like Hitler didn't want to actually do the final solution to the Jews and kill them. He just wanted to simply expel them peacefully. But then the Grand Mufti in Palestine, which was a fucking British Grand Mufti anyway, like the British mandate Grand Mufti, gave him the idea of like killing the Jews, actually, as a matter of fact, as though there wasn't enough historical literature at the time that definitely showed that he wanted to kill the Jews.
Believe me, wait till he gets to the Mufti, because I got some shit for you.
Oh, he's going to talk about the Mufti?
Yes, he talks about the Mufti.
Oh, that's my favorite. That's my favorite. This is, again, severe anti-Arab and severe Islamophobia that like, where you're desperately trying to, because you know that like the current threat to your nation making your apartheid state existing in the way that it does is Muslims, is Arabs. So you are engaging in this act of like trying to say that like Islam has always been the worst enemy. Islam has always been the worst enemy. That's why desperately you have to make this stick by being like, actually the Palestinians are the reason why the Holocaust happened. It's fucking disgusting. It's gross. It's disgusting. It blows my fucking mind. Was there anything you wanted to show, by the way?
No. Oh, not until he gets to the Mufti.
Okay.
Brits say, we're not doing that. 75,000 per year because we have to get along with the Arab population. This is just before the Holocaust, obviously. And the Arabs reject this. The Arabs are very angry about this.
Because I will say, he says, this is just before the Holocaust, obviously. Not to them, it was obvious. That's the whole fucking point.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to interrupt to say that, because that kind of floored me when I watched this the first time. It's like, could you believe those people for not, like, you know, letting the Jews in on the eve of the Holocaust? And it's like, buddy, do you think the Jews in Poland had any idea that it was coming? Come on. Like, that's just not serious.
Not only that, but also, but also you can literally make that argument against Europe and it would be a better point. Like, what the fuck? What do you mean? Like, it's so ridiculous. It's the fucking British that are sending Jewish people there. Like, what the fuck? Why won't they keep the Jews safe in England? Like, what the fuck is going on here? How is this all? It's always a double bind. No matter what happens, it's like the Arabs' fault. It's the Arabs' fault.
Continue to launch low-level attacks on the British. They continue to attack Jewish populations. World War II breaks out. The Jews, including Jews who were heavily pushing the British to establish a Jewish state and to lift restrictions on Jewish immigration into British Mandate Palestine, they side with the Brits, right? They form their own divisions. They're trying to help the British. What they say is that we fight for Jewish immigration to Palestine as though there were no Germans, and we fight the Germans as if there were no British, right? That's the way the Jews see it in British Mandate Palestine. They're attempting to negotiate. The Arabs side with Hitler. Okay, during World War II, you have Hashmin al-Husseini. He's the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem.
Yep.
The
got
Mufti.
him and everything. And I just sent you a link. Basically, the Zionists also tried to recruit the Nazis. Eichmann visited Israel.
Oh, are you going to talk about Leahy?
Yeah, like, there's like So there's no real like I don't like to be clear, the majority of the Zionist movement did not want to get in bed with Hitler necessarily, but for the people who are most involved and for the people who were strategic actors here, they had a broader they took a broader perspective, I think. And especially
these guys were the fucking freaks, though. Like the Stern
exactly,
gang.
The freaks, but they're also the freaks whose children are sort of and who's among them their leader Menachem Begin, not their children, just a guy who was one of them. They become the first they're the first next generation of Israeli political leaders after the labor Zionist of the first couple decades.
Oh yeah. But you're absolutely correct, and I'm glad that you showed this. Yes. Once again, you had the Haganah fighters, you had Lehi, and you had Irgun as far as like the three most prominent Zionist brigades, right? Am I getting this right? I don't want to fuck it up.
Yep.
And out of them, the Lehi and am I saying it right?
Lehi.
Lehi. The Lehi and the Irgun brigades were like the Haganah was like basically the standing army, like what became a standing army. Whereas like I feel like as far as everything I've read about it, like Lehi and Irgun were more Lehi openly called themselves terrorists, where like that was a declaration that they adopted personally, and they were significantly more violent as well. In comparison to the other brigades. Not to say that the other brigades weren't, but the reason why this is also important, in my opinion, is because, like, Deir Yassin, like, they participated in the Deir Yassin slaughter and massacre that plays a really important role in the Nakba in general, in getting Palestinians to hear the brutality and the cruelty. The reason why I'm personally mentioning it, though, is because one of those motherfuckers is still alive. That 97-year-old shitbag Nazi fuck that the IDF rolls around to, I guess, instill morale in the troops. Like that dude fucking that committed atrocities, openly committed atrocities, is still the oldest IDF reservist to understand the mentality and the mythos, like the mythos of fascism here and how you make it stick. Like you got to go back not that long ago in history and recognize the cruelty, which I would say Israelis do and celebrate. Yeah. The Mufti lost all of his power after he approached the Nazis and continuously tried to get back in the good graces of the British.
The Palestinian leaders at the time, the Arab leaders at the time, and he was literally meeting with Hitler, attempting to encourage Hitler to establish a final solution in the Holy Land should the Germans be able to.
I can't believe he just did that. I can't, dude. He did the same fucking shit that Benjamin Netanyahu did that got him so much criticism. This is what is really frustrating to me, dude. I don't understand. Like, how are you going to say anti-Semitism is a crime, right, in half of these fucking countries, and then, like, not have any issue with, like, doing an anti-Semitic Holocaust revisionist take that literally takes away responsibility of the Holocaust away from the Nazis?
Object permanence is tough with these people. The only thing they give a shit about is the enemy that's right in front of them. And for him, it's, it's the Arabs.
It's oh man, it makes me so fucking mad.
Conquer that area, which the Germans came pretty close. I mean, you had Rommel literally in Egypt, right? Rommel was over here. Okay, so fast forward, you're now after World War II. Still, the British mandate is limiting the amount of Jewish immigration into British mandate Palestine because they're attempting to keep this conflict between the Jews and the Arabs simmering at a lower level. Okay, 1947, there's a UN partition plan because now the British mandate in Palestine, they want to end it. They want to withdraw. They don't want to be there anymore. So the UN says, okay, we're going to vote on a partition plan. It retains Jerusalem as internationally governed. Okay, so it would not have been Jewish territory or Arab territory. It would have been internationally governed. It's just this fragmented, ridiculous
This part is pretty
the state for the Jews would have been like a slice here, a little bit of a slice of the coastal area here, and then the Negev desert down here. The Jews are like,
wait, did we just skip? Wait, I'm crazy. We did UN partition. I kind of like spaced out after the Mufti. He ran into the UN partition, completely skipped the part, I feel like, where the Jewish population at the time is, what, 33%? But they get 50% of the land, or 55% of the land, I think.
You're not supposed to look too closely at the details of the partition plan and why Arabs might have rejected it, why they were the proposals that the UN ended up voting on. Like, you're not supposed to look at that. You're simply supposed to hear the phrase, the Arabs were presented with plans and they rejected them. And that's it. And you're not supposed to, there's no further inquiry. There's no further assignation of responsibility. You're not going to hear about any of that.
This is literally you cannot fucking explain this story in this way. This is a lie by omission. which is not as bad as like the Holocaust revisionism he engaged in with the Mufti situation that was roundly criticized when Benjamin Netanyahu did it. But, you know, still pretty fucking abhorrent and still pretty morally repugnant. And then he skipped over the Nakba, which is, again, like, I want to stop at these points and criticize it because, like, it's really important to understand the formation, like the inception of the Israeli nation state, because if you skip these ruthless details and act like they're simply minor details that nobody cares about, no one will understand the actual history behind it. That's why I'm stopping here, even though we're 9 minutes in so far. The UN partition plan was unjustifiable and understandably unjustifiable. As I said, a lot of the land that Jewish people had set villages on top of that had been able to settle in was not necessarily arable land. It was not good for agricultural production in general. And ultimately, the additional land that they got here was considered to be, you know, unacceptable by the Arab population for understandable reasons, to which there was obviously, you know, anger and frustration.
Lower level.
But at this point, the brigades that had already started forcibly ethnically displacing Palestinian villages and like pushing Palestinians out, pushing Arabs out of their villages, at this point, Haganah, Irgun, and also the Lehi brigades were militarized. They had experience. Some of them had fucking fought in World War II. Like they had British mandated police equipment. They had tanks. They had a fucking plane at a certain point. Like the idea that this was like anything but a standing army ruthlessly and efficiently and deliberately ethnically displacing 700,000 Arabs from their ancestral homes. Anyone that doesn't recognize that is lying. They are engaging in, I would say, genocide denial, something akin to, I don't know if it would be genocide denial, but something akin to genocide denial.
I think it is genocide denial. I mean, I think that it's like, because it's describing one half of the thing without describing any of what could be very, kind of like ghoulishly called like negative externalities, any of the consequences, any of the, the actual like bad stuff, and not just we got to make a state, like, it was like, well, that like, it was all about the process by which the Jews got history redeemed for them, or redeemed it for themselves, but not at whose expense it came. Sort of the whole story summed up right there.
It's weird because it's kind of like what Americans say about like Native Americans and how barbaric they were or whatever. But like this happened in 1948, so you can't really like, there are still people that were alive back then, so you can't really fucking lie about it in the same way that like Americans can, right? In Israel,
they definitely did their best. Like like Tel Aviv, the village of Tantura, or the village that's where like Ben Gurion Airport, the international airport in Israel, where it's located. They used to be a village. Like those were variously covered up or lied about. Or people were represented to say that people were told like, listen, you can't. Like there was a very famous case, in fact, regarding the Tantura case, where a master's student wrote his thesis about it, and it was like his professor ended up being forced essentially to leave the country, even though ultimately IDF veterans, I think may have been Haganah veterans, excuse me.
Yeah, Haganah veterans.
They said that we did the massacre at Tantura. That was us.
Yeah, this is really important for a lot of people, because there's two different waves of historians in the short period that Israel has existed, I would say. I don't know, Noah, you know a lot more than I do on this issue, but I feel like, what is it called? The new historians wave that comes from declassified material and literally going and asking the fucking Haganah and Irgun and Lehi veterans themselves personally the atrocities that they committed, some of which openly talk about it in a positive manner, by the way. Not all the fucking veterans are like, oh shit, we really fucked up. Some of them
not
do.
Not even all the historians. Benny Morris is sort of the famous one, and I'm sure Shapiro relies on him for a bunch of this, but
yeah, exactly.
he comes away by saying, like, actually it's good that we did all that.
Yeah.
Whereas the other ones from that period, Tom Segev, Avi Shlaim, and Elon Pape, are much more critical. And some of, and are to varying degrees or not, ostracized from Israeli life.
Yeah, that's the funny part about the material, where like you can use Benny Morris, who is a Zionist, and his material to talk about the atrocities, which then he will reflect back on and say you're a fucking charlatan or whatever. But ultimately, like you wrote it, you said it was good. Like, what the fuck?
And he also believes that Morris wants, or what Morris believes is that, like, what the Arabs wanted was to kill us all. And so that there's, like, if you accept that as a premise, then it's really not such a bad idea to talk about, or to, like, it's, like, we're, like, if we believe that we were legitimate, what do we have to hide from? And I think that that's a very popular attitude within Israel these days.
Yeah. For those of you who want more information on this, by the way, obviously there's a lot of writing on it. But also, one thing that you can watch is, I think there's one on Tantura as well. But specifically, the documentary I really like is 1948 Creation and Catastrophe, where they go straight up and ask the veterans on both sides. I guess, like, you call the Arabs and Palestinians veterans in that situation. I don't know. I mean, they were armed, some of them, but like most of them were civilians, right? That were being ruthlessly slaughtered and running away. But there are people who survived these massacres, and they reflect back on their time. And
I mean, look, also, if people want to read about the massacres from a different angle, look up the memoir by Menachem Begin and start reading from the first chapter. He literally opens with his account of Deir Yassin from the side of the victor.
Yeah.
And it's really disturbing.
That's what I mean. It's like, that's why it's such a fucking weird thing to try and deny, when, like, people are conflicted on whether or not it happened at all, but, like, not really. There's people that were there that openly state that they did those things and it was fucking awesome. Like, and some that think that it was not awesome and unacceptable, like the one guy, the intelligence guy, Mordecai, from specifically the one that testified that his intelligence led to the Deir Yassin massacre. Anyway, we're getting into the weeds of things here, even though, like, obviously there's a long history of atrocities committed here that Ben Shapiro, of course, ignored because he's a gigantic piece of shit. And
also, I am going to have to jump in a moment, but I do want to come back to this video another time, because this is so dense. Because I realize that, like, we've only made this little progress because, like, this is Ben Shapiro speed running through, like, the dumbest guy, like a dumb guy's version of, like this, like a very, like, it's like people say, oh, it's a complicated history, to, like, excuse themselves from having to think something, tough or whatever. But this is a complicated, like, it is a lot. And he's, sort of operating at like a mile a minute to.
I don't think it's complicated. I think it's dense, but, like, the morality, in my opinion, is very clear in one direction.
That's totally, I think it's just like on a fact basis. There's a lot to take in, and a lot that's particularly unfamiliar to Americans, or that, like, is, because the default mode in American culture and in public life is so pro-Israel that it is, it's you can just kind of, I can sympathize for people for how it feels, like, overwhelming or whatever. But in the case of somebody like Shapiro, this video is a pretty great example of just, like, how many different, like, dumb ideas and lies and myths you can package into sequence,
Yeah. Okay. You got to go right now? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Noah Colvin, for coming on. This is our first part of the series. We spent 3 hours on the first 9 minutes of Ben Shapiro's idiotic video. Here's the truth about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a comprehensive history, which is riddled with lies.
Yeah, a comprehensive history that's getting a comprehensive debunking. I got more notes to go through, so I'm holding you to this. I'll be back soon.
Okay, I won't watch the rest of this without you then. I'll wait.
Good.
All right.
Alrighty. See you, man. Take care.
Bye. All right, that was Noah Colwin. We are reaching new records at the HasanAbi broadcast with how long it takes me to go through a motherfucking how long it takes me to go through a motherfucking Ben Shapiro video. God damn. God damn. Hasan barely reacts. Could you please provide guidance on the most reliable place to donate to Palestine? Pretty please. You're on the front page of Reddit by accident? Wait, what? Why? How am I on the front page of Reddit? Don't worry, you've done worse. I mean, this is a thing that I've read so much about, and it's so fucking dense. It's so it's literally in the corner of a screenshot as usual. Oh, nice. Dude doesn't even acknowledge the fact that Israel didn't have any Air Force in the 48 war and that the British Air Force was the one that repelled the Arab Egyptian Air Force mainly. Yeah, I mean, it was everything that... Bro, they had tanks. How'd they get tanks? How did the Zionist brigades get fucking armored personnel carriers and tanks? Much to consider here. How the fuck did that happen? Who knows? How did they have, like, you know, military equipment? How did that happen?